The moment the words left Jimmy Fallon's mouth, the room went still. It was as if someone had sucked the air out of the studio. Emma Watson, sitting cross-legged in her sharp navy suit, froze for a half-second, just long enough for the audience to sense the storm brewing behind her poised expression. Fallon had tried to make it light, maybe even humorous in his own way, but what he said came off as tone-deaf, dismissive, and borderline insulting. So, do you think feminism still matters in Hollywood now that, women kind of run the place? The crowd gave a half-laugh, half-groan, unsure whether to chuckle or cringe. Emma's fingers slowly untangled from each other. She leaned forward, her voice calm but charged. "Did you just ask me that on national television?" The audience went completely silent. Fallon blinked, unprepared. Her tone wasn't angry, it was surgical. Something had just shifted, and no one watching had any doubt that a reckoning was about to unfold. Under the studio lights, everything looked perfect, on the surface. The set gleamed in that familiar blue and amber glow, bathed in artificial comfort. Jimmy Fallon, ever the affable host in his crisp grey suit and playful smile, had opened the segment with his usual energy. Emma Watson was radiant, confident, articulate, her posture straight but relaxed. She was promoting a new film, a thriller set in post-war Europe, and the conversation had begun with the usual round of jokes and praise. Fallon complimented her accent work, joked about how Americans can't pronounce Hermione, and even brought out a vintage Harry Potter wand for a quick laugh. The mood was light, casual. The audience clapped, laughed, and admired the on-screen chemistry. But there was something in the way Emma spoke, something guarded beneath the grace. Fallon, perhaps riding on the momentum of laughter, took a detour. A segue that didn't quite fit. The words stumbled out too quickly. "With everything going on in Hollywood these days," he said, his voice tilting toward a smirk, "do you ever feel like feminism is kind of old news?" That's when it began to shift. Emma didn't react right away. She took a long breath. Her smile dimmed just a little, the corners of her mouth tightening. The audience didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness one of the most unexpected, electrifying moments live TV had seen in years. It started in the eyes. Emma's posture remained composed, but her gaze hardened slightly. Not in anger, but precision. Fallon didn't seem to notice. He chuckled at his own phrasing, probably assuming Emma would respond with a soft correction or a playful retort. But her silence lingered, not uncomfortable silence, calculated. Her fingers brushed the edge of her seat. "That's an interesting question," she said finally, her voice soft but exact. Fallon leaned back, maybe sensing something. She continued, "What do you mean by old news?" Her tone wasn't sarcastic. It was the kind of rhetorical dissection that makes you rethink everything you just said. Fallon tried to recover. "I mean, just with so many powerful women in charge now, like it feels like maybe once the work is done." Another half-laugh from the audience, more hesitant this time. Emma's lips parted, and she let out a quiet breath. "So, when a few women are visible, we declare the fight over?" The room was shifting. Laughter died down. Fallon's grin wavered. Emma's gaze stayed locked. The audience was still, but their energy was changing. They weren't just watching an interview anymore. They were watching a conversation unravel into something raw, real, and incredibly revealing. And then it happened. The pivot. The part that would go viral, replayed in clips across the internet with titles like "Emma Watson Shuts Down Jimmy." Fallon on Live TV. She tilted her head, calm but sharper now. "You know, Jimmy," she said, "I've spent a decade in rooms where people politely nod while dismissing every concern I raise. I've been the only woman at tables where I'm interrupted, talked over, or asked to smile more, even when I'm the one leading the project." Her voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it grew heavier. Feminism isn't a trend. It's not something that expires because a few women made it through the gate. The audience let out a hushed sound, part admiration, part shock. Fallon adjusted his cufflink, nodding a little too quickly. Emma continued, "There are still wage gaps. There's still abuse of power, systemic underrepresentation, and an industry that only listens to women when it's convenient." Her tone was a scalpel, not a hammer. And asking whether feminism is still necessary, that's part of the problem. Fallon's expression shifted. The smile was gone, replaced with a measured, slightly embarrassed blink. The dynamic had shifted. Emma wasn't reacting anymore. She was commanding the space, and now she leaned in. Her voice slowed, not for emphasis but clarity. "Do you know how often I get told I'm too outspoken or too intense?" she asked. Fallon, unsure of how to respond, offered a faint, "I'm sure it's often?" She gave a small nod. "Exactly. And yet, when men speak with conviction, it's passion. When women do it, it's aggression." A beat passed. "You know what's exhausting, Jimmy? Having to explain this over and over again on every platform, and then being told to lighten up." Her tone never cracked. It didn't need to. It was the truth delivered without apology. The crowd began to clap, a slow ripple of support, growing into something louder. Emma paused, letting the applause speak. Fallon shifted in his seat again. His eyes glanced at the teleprompter, but it was clear this interview had taken a life of its own, far beyond scripted talking points. Emma's voice softened. Not weaker, more deliberate. "I'm not angry, I'm just tired." And then she added, "Tired of being asked if equality is still relevant." She looked Fallon directly in the eye. "You're a good man, Jimmy. But this kind. Turve question. It's why the work isn't done. Because if people who mean well are still framing it like this, imagine what it's like in rooms without cameras." That line landed hard. It wasn't a jab. It was insight. Honest, brutal, and impossible to argue with. Fallon opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And it wasn't just him who was quiet. The studio itself had fallen into a hush, a collective reckoning. A moment that made everyone watching reevaluate the casual, unchallenged ways we talk about progress. And Fallon, to his credit, tried to recover, but not with jokes, not this time. I hear you," he said, "and you're right. I didn't mean it like that, but I understand now how it sounded. I'm sorry." His voice was a little softer, a little more real. Emma nodded once. "That's all I ever want. Understanding, accountability, not perfection." And in that moment, she wasn't just an actress or an activist. She was a mirror, reflecting everything back with clarity. The applause returned stronger now, not because of drama, but because something true had been said. And it was Emma who had the final word. As the segment closed, Fallon shifted to break, but you could see the change. He looked at Emma not just as a guest, but as someone who had just educated him and everyone watching in the most graceful yet unflinching way possible. Emma adjusted her suit, smiled softly, and said, "We don't want to dominate. We just want equity, that's all," the audience roared. Not out of hype, but resonance. When the clip hit social media, it exploded. Not because it was controversial, but because it was necessary. Every platform carried it. Feminist groups praised Emma's poise. Critics of woke Hollywood tried to spin it. But even many of them had to acknowledge she had spoken with clarity and conviction. Fallon's team released a follow-up statement, admitting the question was poorly phrased. And Emma? She didn't gloat. She didn't do a follow-up interview. She let the moment speak for itself, quietly, powerfully. And now the question goes to you. Was Jimmy Fallon out of line? Or just clumsy in his phrasing? Did Emma Watson go too far, or was this exactly the kind of public pushback we need more of? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear every perspective. And if you want more moments like this, real, raw, and completely unscripted, don't forget to hit subscribe. Because the next confrontation? It's already on the horizon. In the days that followed, media outlets dissected every second of the exchange. Think pieces flooded digital columns. The Guardian, Vulture, Variety, and even BuzzFeed couldn't resist adding their angle. Some praised Emma for her bravery and restraint. Others debated whether Fallon had simply made a mistake. But what no one could deny was the impact, a ripple that extended far beyond the walls of that studio. Talk shows, panels, and college classrooms brought it up. "Did you see what happened between Fallon and Watson?" became a conversation starter. For many, it wasn't just about that one question. It was about how often these casual dismissals of feminism occur, cloaked in jokes or careless curiosity. Emma's words echoed, especially the line, "If people who mean well are still," framing it like this, "Imagine what it's like in rooms without cameras." That quote ended up on posters, Instagram stories, and even protest placards days later. It struck a nerve, because so many people, especially women in the industry, recognize that dynamic. The subtle undermining, the casual questions that reduce systemic issues into bite-sized, dismissible soundbites. What Emma did wasn't just react, she reframed. She took back control of the narrative, not by shouting, but by standing firm, in truth. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that progress isn't about optics. It's about interrogation of our assumptions, our language, and our blind spots. Behind the scenes, sources say Fallon reached out to Emma personally. It wasn't a PR move, it was, reportedly, a sincere call. He apologized again, not on air, not on Twitter, but privately. And Emma, as always, responded with grace. "I'm glad we had that moment," she supposedly told him. "It wasn't easy, but it was honest." That's who she is. She doesn't fight for the spotlight. She fights for clarity, for truth, for the millions who never get to sit on that couch and speak truth to power, even in its most well-meaning form. And it wasn't the first time Emma Watson had used her platform this way. From her iconic UN speech launching the He for She campaign to her vocal advocacy in the Time's Up movement, she's been consistent, not loudest in the room, not always trending, but steady, committed, intentional, which is why this moment with Fallon mattered. Because it wasn't an outburst, it was the latest chapter in a long story of principled resistance. Meanwhile, Fallon's show moved on, as shows do. New guests, fresh segments, musical acts, and comedy sketches. But that night remained etched in the studio's atmosphere. Even his regular viewers noticed a change in tone afterward. For a few episodes, Fallon seemed quieter, more deliberate, less performative when addressing serious topics. Maybe it was temporary, or maybe it marked a shift, a moment of growth catalyzed not by cancellation, but by confrontation. And that's what made the whole exchange so powerful. It wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't about calling someone out for points. It was a call-in, a demand for better questions, better framing, better awareness. It was, in its purest form, what feminism aims to do, not tear down. Men but challenge systems, language and habits that diminish women, even unintentionally. In fan circles, the moment became symbolic. Emma's fans, who had followed her since the days of Hogwarts, felt vindicated, not just because she won a verbal spar, but because she showed them how to do it, with facts, with grace, and without backing down. Feminist forums called it a masterclass in public accountability. Twitter, as always, had its memes. Fallon blinking awkwardly, Emma's quote overlaid in bold text. Side-by-side clips of male celebrities asked deep questions versus women asked about their diet. But beyond the memes was a deeper respect, a collective global nod of understanding. One professor from NYU wrote a piece titled "The Emma Watson Moment: Why Feminism Still Needs Its Loudest Silences." In it, she described how silence, when used purposefully, can expose more than words ever could. Emma's initial pause, her decision not to immediately laugh or deflect, disrupted the rhythm of the talk show, and in doing so, exposed its flaws. It was like holding up a mirror, in real time, and the reflection made people pause. Months later, when Emma was interviewed again, this time by a female journalist for The Cut, she briefly touched on that night. "I didn't go there to make a point," she said. "But when that question came, I realized I couldn't stay silent. Not again, not when so many people are watching, especially young women trying to make sense of the world and their place in it." And with that, she moved on to other topics, her film, her activism, her reading list. She didn't linger in the moment, because she didn't need to, and that's perhaps the most powerful part. Emma didn't exploit the controversy. She didn't turn it into a media tour. She let the message do the work, because she knew that what mattered wasn't what happened to her, but what could happen through her words. It wasn't about Fallon. It wasn't even about her. It was about making people think, deeply and maybe a little uncomfortably, about how we speak, who we listen to, and why certain questions still get asked in rooms filled with lights and cameras. That night became a blueprint, not just for celebrities but for anyone with a platform, a reminder that even the most casual conversation can be a battlefield for truth, and how you respond, how you hold your ground, can echo far beyond the stage. So again, we ask you, what did you take away from Emma's response? Was Fallon just making a clumsy joke? Or does it reflect something deeper, something we all need to unlearn? Leave your thoughts below. Let's talk about it. And if you want more stories that peel back the mask of celebrity and reveal the raw, unfiltered moments of real truth, make sure you're subscribed. Because moments like this, they don't just entertain, they wake us up. And trust us, the next one is just around the corner. If you'd like a version with subtitles for international viewers, chapter markers, or a split-clip format for reels, and shorts, just say the word. And that ripple effect, it didn't just stop with entertainment media. Within days, academic circles, corporate training programs, and even a few mainstream HR workshops began referencing the Emma Watson incident as a contemporary case study in gender bias, language framing, and how power dynamics unfold in public discourse. It became a model for understanding how seemingly small remarks, especially from powerful platforms, carry the weight of generations of struggle. And how, if left unchallenged, they subtly reinforce the very systems we claim to be dismantling. One of the most poignant reactions came from a former Hollywood producer who now teaches media literacy at UCLA. In an op-ed titled Fallon's Feminism Flub What We All Missed, she wrote, "What Fallon said wasn't the worst thing ever said on TV. It was the most familiar. And that's what made it dangerous." Her words hit hard, because that's what so many viewers recognized. It wasn't just one man's misstep. It was a reflection of how deeply cultural assumptions still live in the way we joke, the way we interview, the way we frame entire movements as optional, trendy, or, as Fallon said, kind of old news. Meanwhile, younger viewers, especially Gen Z and feminist TikTokers, turned the moment into a digital campaign. Hashtags like Still Feminist, Emma Was Right, and Ask Better Questions trended globally. Short, impactful clips of the exchange circulated with on-screen captions. "You're a good man, Jimmy, but this kind of question, it's why the work isn't done." These weren't fan edits. These were cultural declarations. Emma had reignited a conversation that too many assumed was already resolved. She forced the world to confront an uncomfortable truth. Surface-level progress isn't real progress if it shuts down the discussion about the work still left to do. Brands took note too. One major streaming platform even altered the promo strategy for an upcoming documentary on women in media, inspired by the conversation. "We were going to make it about triumph," one executive anonymously shared, "but now we're focusing on unfinished business because of one moment. One woman refusing to let a question slide for the sake of politeness, back on the Tonight Show." Things eventually returned to normal, but the team behind the scenes quietly updated their interview prep guidelines. According to someone close to the writing staff, there was an unspoken new rule. No more lazy framing, especially on gender. Fallon himself made subtle shifts. He invited more activists onto the show. He allowed deeper, more nuanced conversations to breathe rather than rushing to the next gag. Whether that change was permanent remains to be seen, but for a while you could sense he was trying, and that's worth noting. Growth is rarely perfect, but it's noticeable. Emma, for her part, didn't speak of the moment again in public, but she didn't need to. The clip became self-sustaining, a moment in modern media that stood as both warning and inspiration. In classrooms, young women studied it not as celebrity gossip, but as rhetorical strategy. How she held eye contact, how she paused, how she redirected without hostility. It became quite literally a lesson. And in a time when so much of television feels staged, overproduced, or sanitized, this raw, unscripted interruption cut through the noise. It reminded us that real conversations still matter, that what we say it and how we say it matters, that progress doesn't mean we've arrived. It means we're still moving. So now, as you sit there thinking about what you just watched or read, ask yourself, have you ever said something that, in hindsight, undermined what you thought you stood for? Have you ever dismissed a cause because it felt overexposed, only to later realize your fatigue was actually a form of privilege? These are tough questions, but necessary ones. Because the truth is, feminism isn't old news. It's ongoing, it's evolving, and it's personal, even if it makes us uncomfortable, especially if it makes us uncomfortable. So again, we ask you, are you listening? Not just hearing, but listening. Are you asking better questions? Are you willing to be challenged? Even when it stings. If this moment stirred something in you, share it, pass it on. Let it spark conversations in your home, your workplace, your classroom, your online feed. Let it remind you that the most powerful thing we can do sometimes is not to speak louder, but to listen better and respond with truth. This wasn't just a viral moment. This was a cultural checkpoint, a fork in the road where we decide if we want the illusion of progress or the discomfort of actual change. So let's talk. In the comments, tell us, what did this moment mean to you? Did it change how you see Emma Watson, Jimmy Fallon, feminism? Did it make you think about how you speak and what questions you ask? Let's keep the conversation alive, because this is far from over. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, because the next story we tell might be the one that shifts your perspective all over again. Stay curious, stay honest, and stay awake. We'll see you next time.